Okay, welcome back in, everybody. It's good to see you today. Hope you're doing well. And it's 2020 off season for the Kansas City Chiefs. Still celebrating your Super Bowl victory from last February. So congratulations. I'm sure that never gets old. I'm sure when you wake up every morning, even if you're having a rotten week, you think, hey, we won the Super Bowl, right? So congratulations again to everybody in the organization and to you guys as fans for being able to celebrate something that a lot of fan bases never get to see. You know, you could have everybody compete in the Super Bowl until everybody wins one and just take turns throughout the NFL, and it would still take 3 decades for everybody to get a shot to win the Super Bowl. So, congratulations. No reason to think when you look at the Chiefs as a whole this year that they can't be right back there and do it again. Yeah, they got a mountain of work to do. Every team in the NFL does, but there's no reason to think, absolutely no reason to think, that the Chiefs cannot win this thing all over again this year. Are there some other good teams out there? Absolutely. Are there some teams who could even keep you from getting to the Super Bowl this year? Yeah, absolutely. But there's absolutely no reason to feel like, man, for some reason we just couldn't repeat because it hasn't been done very much. This team can absolutely repeat, and I think everybody knows that and understands that. So the defense, the organization surprised me a little bit this year. Brett Beach did. Last year, they were incredibly aggressive in the offseason, more than I expected them to be. This year, I joked in one of the videos I made that they could actually keep the entire team together and really not change the roster at all and just challenge everybody else to come up and get to be as good as the Chiefs are. I really, I really didn't expect that to happen. But that's basically what the Chiefs have done. They've made a couple of minor changes, but for the most part, they have left the roster alone. And that's unusual in the NFL. Usually teams can't do that. Either they have so many talent struggles that they've got to change the roster, or they have so many financial difficulties laying on their doorstep that they're forced to change for those reasons. So this is very unusual, extremely unusual for any NFL team to leave their roster like this from one year to the next. But I understand why the Chiefs are doing it because they have a heck of a team and they have every reason to think that they could be winning a Super Bowl again this year. So today we're looking at the defense. And I'm going to start with what I think is your strongest part of your defense, and that is right here at safety. Now, this may not be where the best player on defense lies. I think that's down here with Chris Jones, right? I think that's your best guy on defense. But this, I think, is the best part of your defense. And by the way, this is the part of your defense that improved the most last year. You look at 2017 and 2018, there were lots of problems, including getting run on all the time. But the biggest reason that the defense improved in 2019 is right here because of Tyrann Mathieu and Juan Thornhill. Both of them just stepped up. And, you know, Matthew's been a good player in this league for a very long time, and you're paying for that at $16.3 million. But he is so good at what he does, you don't feel like this is an overpay. Usually, free agents, no matter how good they are, you are overpaying for their services. And I don't think you feel like that when you're looking at Tyrann Mathieu. He can do so much. In reality, you know, we call him a safety, but he spent, I think, just as much time dropping down to CB last year as he really did playing safety. He has no problem locking in on other wide receivers one on one and covering them. That doesn't mean he's an elite CB by any stretch because he's not, but he has no problem playing in one-on-one situations and covering some of the best receivers in the league. Now, he couldn't do that all game long every week, but in certain situations, he is more than willing and eager to take on the toughest assignments and cover those receivers, and does an excellent job of it. So he's almost like a CB, really, as much as he is a safety. But he's a safety because he also has no problem dropping down into the box and getting tough on the running game. He's good and solid there inside the box, and he's an intelligent player. He knows how to cover, how to call defenses. He knows how to cover other players' positions and watch out for what they're doing. So he knows how to do all of this. Tyrann Mathieu does an excellent job. And so $16.3 million, even though that's a big cap number, he just does so much that you do not feel like that you're overpaying here, even though that is a very large cap number. And I don't know that, you know, if I had been doing it in the start, that I would have signed him to this number. But looking back on it, this is a number I like. $16.3 million for Tyrann Mathieu. I think he has proved his worth back there, and the secondary has shown it. Juan Thornhill, this is a good draft pick here by the Chiefs. I don't know whose final call that was. If that was Brett Beach's, I assume it was. This is a good draft pick right here. They did an excellent job getting Thornhill out of Virginia. Only been making $1 million this year, of course, because it's in his second season on that rookie contract. He had an outstanding season. All right, this guy nailed down the starting job. He absolutely nailed it down. He wasn't a fringe starter. He wasn't a guy who got thrown into the fire because they had nobody else to put there. Thornhill was a guy last year who really stepped up and played solid at the safety position. And I'm going to say the same thing about Thornhill that I'm going to say about almost the entire Chiefs defense. You can expect him to get even better in 2020. And I think you can expect that out of the entire Chiefs defense. When you look at the board here and you move from Matthew and Thornhill to Clark, and you step over here to Neiman and to Gay and O'Daniel, and when you look at Ward and Fenton and all the players on here, you look very quickly and you realize there's really nobody here who we're worried about getting old all of a sudden. Nobody's sitting up there at the 31, 32-year-old age bracket, and you're wondering, okay, when is Father Time going to catch up with him? Most of these guys are in their early to mid-20s, still at an age where you expect them to get better. You expect them to get more intelligent from an NFL IQ standpoint. You would expect them to get stronger from their workouts than maybe they were even in college. You really have every reason to expect that these guys as individuals, because of their age, can get better. On top of that, you've got another year in Spagnuolo's defense. Everybody's more comfortable with their roles. Everybody should understand the lingo and the verbiage better. And Spagnuolo should have a better feel for what these guys can do even than they had a year ago. So there's no reason to expect that this defense, which was playing good by the end of last year, I think the last 6-7 games of last year, they had really begun to step up as a defense and were playing extremely well. Now, are they an elite defense? They're not. Don't look for this to be the Chicago Bears. They're not that good of a defense. This is a very good defense. They could have even a chance, if everything falls together, to be a top 12, top 10 kind of a defense if they continue to push the right buttons and if guys develop as much as they could. And you've got enough young guys here on this defense who are still kind of in those years where they can get better to expect that that could happen. Even if it doesn't, you're still okay. Even if the defense doesn't get any better than it was at the end of last year, this was still a good, solid defense. So a lot of good things here to look at for the Kansas City Chiefs on defense. And Juan Thornhill is one of those things, okay? Only making $1 million, has basically locked down a starting job. So unless you see some regression, which there's no reason to expect that, unless you see some regression, Thornhill is just a fantastic deal here to be a solid starter, not a fringe starter, but a solid starter for $1 million. And so you got the two safety positions covered. And like I said, Matthew is so good at what he does, man, they just move him all over the secondary, and they even drop him into the box to help on run defense. And he does a good job of that. Really smart player here for Matthew, and Thornhill holding down that starting job for only $1 million. So in essence, you have two starters here for about $8 million each, if you want to count it that way, $8.5 million each. So that's you're still kind of paying a lot of money at safety, but it's worth it because of how good they are back there at safety. How's your depth? Your depth is not wonderful, but your depth is not awful either. And by depth, I mean if one of these guys gets injured and somebody's got to step in and play, what do you have? Well, to begin with, you've got Daniel Sorensen. He's really the valuable backup here. Sorensen is a guy who played very well as a backup and a limited guy, I think in 17. And then when he started having to play more snaps in 18 and then in 19, he didn't look as good, especially in 2018. But this is a valuable backup. Sorensen is the kind of guy who athletically, he may really not be able to do a great job in pass coverage, even in zone coverage. He's just not that good athletically to do that. But he's a smart player. He understands roles, and he can fit very easily in as a starter for 3 or 4 weeks, and you don't feel like you're going to get embarrassed. And also as a backup, coming in to play certain snaps and keep the other guys fresh, Sorensen does an excellent job of that. Now, you're paying a little bit for that. You're paying $4.8 million. So I don't know that this is just an absolute great value here from Sorensen, but for what he produces, for what he adds in terms of just being there for depth, I think he's worth that $4.8 million, at least until you can get somebody better. Now, do you have somebody better? Well, we're going to find out with Snead here, drafted in the 4th round this year. Of course, he's only making $770,000 on that rookie deal. We'll see if Snead can step up and be the guy who maybe takes over Sorensen's role in the future and is that valuable backup, in which case you could let Sorensen walk and take that $5 million and begin to start to work out the logistics on Patrick Mahomes' very large contract that is coming up. So that could be $5 million here if Snead can step up and be that kind of a player. That Sorensen, who, nobody wants to say goodbye to Sorensen because he's a good backup, but for $5 million, you could take that money and put it somewhere else. And we all know where that's got to go is on Mahomes' contract coming up. So over the next few years, I think this is a good move here to pull Snead in and just see if you can save some money there. Now, what it also does, it starts to give an indication possibly, and the Chiefs would deny this, but you have to wonder if maybe they aren't starting to feel like Armani Watts just isn't going to work out at safety, right? Because you drafted safety here in 2 back-to-back seasons. Snead in the 4th round this year, and you got Thornhill last year, and Thornhill's already locked up a safety spot. So you start to wonder here, have the Chiefs kind of started to move on from Armani Watts? Now, he's still on the roster. He can still step up. He might still be a contributor. We just haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen Armani Watts do that. And the fact that the Chiefs have spent 2 more draft picks here at safety with Snead and Thornhill makes you start to wonder if they aren't kind of sort of moving on from this. In any case, best case scenario, it could still happen. Snead steps up and is able to be a starter safety as well. Thornhill continues to play well. In a season or two, when Matthews' contract starts to get a little bigger and you can save money and let him go, say in 21 or in 22, because Thornhill and Snead are playing so well, and then maybe even Watt steps up and as a good backup, you've got a lot of good things happening here at safety. Could it fall apart? Not really. Only if one of these guys gets injured and if all 3 of these players struggle to be worth anything on the field this year. But that's just not going to happen. Okay, Sorensen has proven that he can be a decent substitute for a few snaps each game or for a few games during each season. So at safety there, you're okay with depth, and you have 2 good starters, and one of those starters, in fact, is just playing at a very high level and doing so much for your defense. This, I think, is the strong part of your defense. Let's move over to the CB side of things. CB was a wreck for years, right? I mean, you go through 16 and 17 and 18, and, it's not that you don't have anybody at CB, but, man, CB is just kind of a mess. You're not a mess anymore. You're also not elite. Let's start with Charvarius Ward. Ward is the kind of guy making $750,000 who is holding down that starting spot and doing a good job with that. He is so athletic and he looks so good when he locks in on man coverage that you wonder, could this guy become elite? Now, I missed on this guy, I think, a season and a half ago, and Chiefs fans were telling me how good they thought this guy could be. And I went back and I looked at the video, and when you see him lock in on wide receivers in man coverage, he looks excellent. He looks like he can't wait to go wherever that wide receiver is going, and he's got the athleticism to do it. So I think Charvarius Ward, I think you can expect him, if he continues to get good coaching, I think you can expect him to keep getting better. Now, we'll see about that. Right now, he's a solid starter, and that's what he is. But I think you might see him even get better than that in the seasons to come. In any case, he's going to hold down one of those CB spots, and he's going to do that, and he's going to be able to, I don't think you're going to see any regression there, certainly. He's going to do a good job of that and getting great value there at $750,000. I want to drop down to the slot position here for a second. We lose Kendall Fuller, right? And part of me was like, man, I hate to see Kendall Fuller go because I really like the way he played the position. He is a good slot corner, but they made the right decision here. I think he goes to Washington for 40 years and $40 million. So you're just not going to be able to pay that kind of money to a slot CB when you know that the Patrick Mahomes contract is fixing to just balloon to about 10 times of what it is at the moment. So this was a great decision by the Chiefs to let Kendall Fuller go. It was almost an easy decision though, because you start to run out of money at a certain point. Could you have made it fit? Yeah, you could have, but the smart thing was to let it go. The decision was even easier by the fact that Fenton, a guy who you drafted, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but Fenton looked pretty good in limited playing time in 2019 when he's lining up at slot CB. You felt good about what he was doing there, and so letting Kendall Fuller go really was not a hard decision, massive money-making decision. If Fenton looks as good in, say, 900 or 1,000 snaps this year as he did in the limited playing time he got last year, and I think you can expect that, then Fenton, again, is another great value. You never know for sure. Sometimes guys look good in limited playing time. They get 300 or 400 snaps, and then you roll them over into a starting spot, and they really start to struggle. It's almost as if their blemishes are something they just can't hide. Opposing offenses and offensive coordinators figure out how to expose this particular player because of their weaknesses. So you never know, but if Fenton looks as good in limited time as he did in limited time in 19, in 20, then this is another good spot right here. High value, young player, rookie contract, holding down a starting spot. I think you can expect that. Backing up, Fenton will be Lamons right here. Fenton, Lamons will be backing him up. See if Lamons can step up and be a decent slot corner as well for only $675,000. Now, the interesting spot to me is this. I'm going to go back up to Bashaud Breeland, making $3 million, which is not a lot. Matter of fact, that's very low. Breeland is a good defensive player. He's an athletic defensive player. But he really struggles in pass coverage. Zone, man, doesn't matter. He struggles in pass coverage, which is kind of a big deal since he's a cornerback, right? And that's the number one thing they do is pass coverage. Now, Breeland really almost plays more like a safety. You watch him get into the box, and you watch him hit people, and you watch him fight through traffic, and you watch him tackle, and you watch him in the run, and you watch him when he does drop back into zone as a safety. He doesn't play horribly. But when it comes to covering a guy man on man, he really struggles with that. And I mean, he struggles big time. This is not a pure CB. This guy is kind of a halfway between safety and CB, and he really struggles in man coverage. And, you know, when you start to ask what keeps us from being an elite defense versus a top 15 or top 20 defense, this is one of the things that you start to see. Ward is solid, not elite. Breeland is a guy who struggles in man pass coverage. And so then you start to have to shift more to zone coverages, and you start to share those responsibilities. And Breeland is a guy here, you know, you're not losing anything at $3 million a season. You're tickled pink to have him here for $3 million a season. But Breeland is a guy who just cannot really lock in on other receivers one-on-one. So this is one of the things that keeps your defense from being absolute elite, top 5, top 8 kind of a defense. Even so, you're good here at safety. I would be interested in seeing if Hamilton, who was actually physically a little bit more suited for CB2, if Hamilton couldn't line up here and get more snaps at CB2. That's not to say we're shoving Breeland on the bench. In fact, Breeland, because, you know, NFL defenses these days are having to worry so much about pass coverage. So often you're seeing 5 defensive backs, 6, or even 7 defensive backs on the field all the time. Breeland is still going to be very useful in pass coverage. You just wonder, is there any chance here that Hamilton could actually start to get a little bit more playing time, and we'll see how he does. Now maybe Hamilton's not up to that. Maybe he's not ready for that. I'm certainly not suggesting that he is. But it's just a question I put out there because we understand that Breeland struggles in CB and almost plays more like a safety. In fact, the interesting thing here is I think it's Lamons, Fenton, and Breeland. They're all about the same size. They're all right in that 5'11", I think 190, 195 category. They are all basically physically the exact same player here. And that's probably one reason that Breeland struggles in pass coverage. He doesn't have top speed, and he doesn't have the height, so it's almost like he's battling in 2 ways there as he lines up against other wide receivers. So, we'll see what happens here as we play musical chairs a little bit with Kansas City Chiefs. Ward should end up being your CB1. Fenton should end up being your slot. Breeland's going to be your CB2, I think, unless they start playing musical chairs a little bit there. And we'll see if Hamilton can step up and get any more snaps. So here you are at CB. CB, you're fine. If somebody gets injured, I don't think it's going to be a disaster. Will there be a step down? Yes. So, if somebody gets injured here at CB, Ward, or Fenton, is there going to be a step down from we're a good CB unit to we're a less than average CB unit? Yes. Right here at safety, you don't have that drop off quite as much, and at safety, you're already better anyway. So the safety unit is better. The CB unit is solid, but not great. Still, you have to feel good about that, especially compared to what you were in, I think, 16 and 17 and 18, right? I'm going to leave the linebackers off. I'm going to save the worst for last, okay? But let's look at defensive end. Defensive end, Frank Clark is solid. Now, he was set to make, I think, $24-25 million this season. They came to him and restructured him a little bit so they could have some money for some other contracts. So his cap number this year is $19.3 million. That's a massive cap number. When he goes to $25-26 million next off season, which they may restructure him again that year too, but when he goes there, he's in the neighborhood of quarterbacks at this point. So you have to ask yourself, do we like having Frank Clark on the team? Yeah, of course. He's aggressive, he's loud, he's solid against the run, he's solid against getting pressure on quarterbacks. He's a solid player. But is he worth $19.3 billion, and is he worth $25 and $26 million? Now, my answer is no, okay? My answer absolutely firmly is no. Frank Clark is not worth that kind of money for his services. Now, the Chiefs, and specifically Brett Veach, are totally on the other end of that. Their answer is yes, Frank Clark is worth every dime of that. But in any case, whatever, the cap number is what it is at this point, right? And you're glad to have Frank Clark on the team. And he's going to lock down the starting spot on that side. He's going to be solid against the run. He's going to get pressure on the quarterbacks. And so you can count on that. And that's kind of an anchor for your defense, something you can rely on, a good solid foundation there. And any team in the NFL would be more than happy to have Frank Clark. We can have all kinds of discussions about the cap number, but any team in the NFL would be happy to have Frank Clark, and the Chiefs have him. And he is a great foundation to build on there at the defensive end position. And it's a good thing, too, because, excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of Coke. It's a good thing, too, because you have a lot of question marks everywhere else at defensive end. When you look at the other starting spots, I've got Okafor lined up there again this year. We'll see if he actually ends up being the other starter. Okafor is a good, valuable player, but he's what we would call a fringe starter. He's not the guy that you plug in and you're like, yes, so happy we've got him locking down that spot. Now, that's how you feel about Clark, but that's not how we feel about Okafor. Okafor, leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of getting pressure on the quarterback. He gets a little bit, but not a lot. You say, well, he makes up for that in the running game. He really doesn't. He kind of struggles in the running game as well. So he's not horrible. He produces and he contributes, and that's important. But does he absolutely lock down this other starting defensive end? And the answer is no. And so the question then becomes, well, who else do we have at defensive end? Well, here's who the Chiefs have. Passing on for $1.4 million. He has really moved on from being a project to being a contributor. We saw that last year. Played a lot of snaps. Not yet a quality starter. Not yet a guy that you can rely on for 1,000 snaps and know that he's going to produce, at least not yet, but maybe he becomes that in 2020. He is growing. He is developing. He is getting better. We know that the Chiefs, when they drafted him, they saw the athleticism, and they're like, we can work this guy into shape. And they're trying to do that. The question is, as always, can you work him into shape quick enough to be a valuable starter before his rookie contract runs out and you have to pay him a lot of money? That's always the question here when you draft a guy like that. Is he getting better? Yes. Will he get a lot of playing time in 2020? Probably so. Is he going to step up and grab that starter position? We'll see about that. Not sure about that yet. Breland Speaks. Can't seem to catch a break. This was a guy who, man, coming into the NFL in the first place, the Chiefs were already talking about moving him around, moving him to different spots than he mostly played in college, and that really didn't work for him in his rookie season. Year two comes around, and he's on the IR. So we really don't know what to see out of Breland Speaks yet. We don't know what he's going to be. Not really even sure where his best position is. So we'll see about Breland Speaks, what they end up doing with him. But for $1.7 million, not costing you a lot to find out. And we'll see if he can nurse his way back from the injury and start getting some more playing time here for the Chiefs. On the other side, you bring in free agency. I forget it's free agency or trade. Bring in Taco Charlton. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's Carlton or Charlton. I'm gonna call him Charlton. $825,000. You know, when you look at him when he was drafted, and when you watch him on TV on the games with the Cowboys, the athleticism is there. He's fast, but he is vastly underweight for defensive end. He's tall. I think maybe he's 6'6". He doesn't weigh a whole lot for defensive end. So in the running game, he gets pushed around a lot, and we understand why. You know, do you try to slide him up there to linebacker? You know, he doesn't seem like he has the equipment to be in pass coverage like we demand of linebackers in today's NFL. So really, this guy is going to be a specialist, I think is what you're going to see out of him. And you hope that his special attribute is that he can get to the quarterback. So when you see his speed, even though he gets pushed around, you hope that Charlton can step up and be a guy who gets pressure on the quarterbacks when it's 3rd and long or 2nd and long. That's kind of what you hope to get out of him. Do not expect him to step up and be the starter. Does he have that kind of potential? Yes, he does. But, you know, he's either going to have to become elite at pass rushing, or he's going to have to put on a lot of weight and muscle so he can hold up against the run. And so right now he's kind of in between what you need here at defensive end. But he's only making $825,000. So smart move here by the Chiefs to bring in a guy who's got talent, a guy who has potential. We haven't seen it produce yet in the NFL, but this is a guy who can do that. And then with Dana right here, the draft pick coming out of the 5th round, we'll see what he contributes. Ideally, you know, in a dream world, you would love to just see Dana step up here and play lights out. I mean, that doesn't usually happen for 5th round draft picks in their first season. But here, good draft pick here by the Chiefs to try to hopefully address these defensive end spots, because you just don't, you know, your depth is okay, but that's really because your other starting defensive end just isn't that great. Okay, so we don't know what we're going to do here at these defensive end positions, but you've got some guys here you can put together. You're so solid at defensive tackle, and you're so good here with Frank Clark at the 1 defensive end position, and you're so good in the secondary, at least solid up here in the secondary spots, that it's not an emergency state to figure out who's really going to be good here at defensive end. And I don't necessarily have to be great. I just need somebody to step in and be consistent. Okafor can be somewhat consistent, but he is limited with what he can do. So we'll see if anybody else, whether it's passing on or Dana, or maybe even Charlton, can step up and eat up some important, valuable snaps, even if they can't do everything, even if they can't eat up 1,000 snaps in the season and be that starter. Guys who step in and contribute during those situations as it's called for. Defensive tackle, I told you you were solid here at defensive tackle, and you are. You know, Chris Jones, I mean, you know, I don't know what the future holds for the Chiefs and for Chris Jones, but right now he's here at $16.1 million. We'll see what they try to do with the Chiefs. You know, I talked about this last year on the finance videos. You've got to make choices somewhere. If you get caught up in trying to pay everybody, for instance, if you pick out 12 players that you cannot win without, you end up over the years, as those guys get off of their rookie contracts, you end up taking larger and larger amounts of money and giving it to those guys, which puts more and more pressure on you to draft better and better. And really, you're not going to be able to draft better and better, especially as you win more and you're drafting lower in each round. It's just not going to happen. So the financial decisions come. We saw one of those with Kendall Fuller, allowed him to move on. The Chiefs were fortunate. They did a good job here with Fenton. We think we've got a guy here to replace Fuller. At defensive tackle, what do you do with Chris Jones? Well, that's a decision for another day, right? We'll see what happens there. But at defensive tackle, he's lights out. He's solid against the run. You know, I see some people who criticize Chris Jones in his run defense. He is not horrible. He is solid. When you break down the defense and you look at how he plays against the run, he is solid. He is not a liability against the run. He's solid. But of course, he's so good at getting to the quarterback. Who cares? It's almost like who cares? He is so good at getting to the quarterback. Chris Jones gets double teamed every game, often triple teamed, often chip blocked. He gets covered. Now Frank Clark has good statistics and good production. He's a good player. He does not get the attention that Chris Jones gets. When you break down the film and you look at how many times Chris Jones gets double teamed and triple teamed by guards and centers and running backs, when you look at that, Chris Jones still produces at a high level getting to the quarterback. He's an absolute beast. Now, is he the elite guy that Aaron Donald is or that Fletcher Cox has been? I don't think he's quite that good, but this is still an amazing player. And at $16.1 million, you're paying for that. But the production is there at defensive tackle. And to me, if you can get pressure on the quarterback from up the middle, that's just as effective, if not more so, than the edge rushers coming off the side that everybody seems to want to throw money at these days. You have actually a pretty good value here if you look at it. Chris Jones continuing to get pressure on the quarterback and to draw so many of the offensive line's resources and attention because they just have to block him and keep him from coming up the middle. So Chris Jones here, magnificent player. After that, there's a drop-off. And here's the interesting part for me. The Chiefs brought in a guy called Mike Pennell, $890,000. This is where me and the NFL are just going to have to disagree. Apparently, very few people think Pennell has too much to offer. I said this an off-season ago, I think when he left the Jets. I think Pennell is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. I think Pennell is a guy who can step up and be a quality starter, even though he's not been able to offer to do that much. So maybe DCs are just seeing something that I don't see when they look at the film or when they see him off in practice. Pennell is a guy who I think can be a decent starter. And even if he's not, he's a really valuable backup. This is a guy here who can play solid against the run, get some pressure on the quarterback, and you have him for only $890,000. I think this is a spectacular move here by the Chiefs, spectacular deal. Not only is your depth better, but I think personally this is a guy who could be a starter. We'll see if that happens or not. But personally, I think the Chiefs are counting on Kalen Saunders to be the starter at defensive tackle. And of course, he's just in his second season, so at $930,000, you got a good deal on him too. So I think the Chiefs are expecting Saunders to step up. But in the meantime, while Saunders is still developing, you have Pennell here. Of course, Saunders is a monster. He's just a huge monster. He's going to develop, and you hope that Saunders can be good against the run and maybe get some pressure on the quarterback as well. After that, you have Derek Nottie. Nottie's a guy who, when he first came out, looked good against the run, struggled to get pressure on the quarterback. Nottie's a guy here for $1 million who seems like he's almost maybe backed up just a little bit. So you're starting to wonder if the Chiefs, you draft Saunders in 19, and you pick up Pennell as a free agent, you almost start to wonder if the Chiefs aren't starting to have the same thoughts about Nottie that they're having about Armani Watts, and that is that maybe he's just not going to work out, and maybe we should start to get some other players here to help. When you start seeing, when a team drafts one guy at your position, you think, okay, well, they're just helping me along, or maybe they're just adding depth. When they start to add two guys to your position, you start to wonder, maybe in their heads, and they would never admit this publicly. By the way, that's one reason you should never listen to general managers or head coaches when they talk about their players. They are always, 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 always going to tell you how good that player is. Well, he's looked good in practice, or he's looked good, in this game or that game, and we just think the world of him. They are never going to tell you the truth about that player. And so if you want to know what a general manager thinks about a player, you look at what they traded to get him, or how high they drafted him, or how much money they're paying him. So I know that Brett Veach thinks the world of Frank Clark because he not only traded for him, but he's willing to pay him, okay? And if you want to know what a coach thinks about a player, you don't listen to what he says in the press conference. You look at how much playing time that player is getting. You look at how many snaps that guy is getting. So I know that Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo like Damian Wilson and Anthony Hitchens at linebacker, even though I'm not a fan of those guys, because they're getting all the snaps, all the playing time. That's what they've decided to do. If you want to know what coaches and general managers think, that's what you look at. So we don't ever listen to the press conferences. So they're never going to say, yeah, we're kind of moving on from Derek Nottie, but that seems to be what may be happening. Now, I think Nottie's going to get some playing time this season. I think he's going to contribute. Absolutely. He's going to be in the rotation. He's going to work hard. He's going to have a good attitude. He's going to be there. But in terms of Nottie stepping up and being your starter this year or in the future, I don't know that necessarily you're going to see that. You might say, well, they're just getting ready for Chris Jones to depart, and that could be the case as well. But anyway, we've got Pennell and Saunders here in the last 2 seasons coming in. Pennell, I think, can be a starter. Saunders is still developing. You're in good shape here at defensive tackle. Nothing really to worry about. Even if you did have an injury, you could get through for a few games. The only thing that you would worry about defensive tackle is you're not great against the run. You're still soft underneath, because even though Jones is solid against the run, he's not great. Pennell is solid against the run. He's not elite. We don't even know if Pennell's going to get the starting time or not. And Nottie and Saunders are still developing. So you still seem soft up the middle. Also at linebacker against the run. Talk more about that in just a second. I want to finish up here with the linebackers. Last year, Wilson and Hitchens got by far the most playing time out of the guys that are coming back. Terrell Suggs, who can play the edge, play the middle, play linebacker. Suggs can move around a lot. When I last checked, this has been about 4 or 5 days ago, Terrell Suggs was still available. Suggs played great last year. I would love to see if you couldn't work out a contract with Terrell Suggs. Now, I don't know, I assume that Suggs' agent is telling him to wait until enough teams get desperate and need somebody and are willing to pay extra. I would assume that's what's happening. I don't know that. But when I checked 4 or 5 days ago, Suggs still hadn't been signed, unless I've just missed it in the past few days. So if I were the Chiefs, I would love to bring Suggs back in here at linebacker and let him play some more. You know, even if he doesn't play a lot, if he plays 500-600 snaps and he produces at least some of what he produced last year, it was a great pickup for the Chiefs last year. And I'm a little surprised they haven't made more of a push to get him back. But they must feel pretty good about what they have here at linebacker. Wilson and Hitchens are the guys that you have coming back who had, I think, like 1,000 snaps each last year. Hitchens, I'm not going to say much about because I don't want to criticize too much. At $12.7 million, I'm not even sure that Hitchens should be starting in the NFL anywhere for any team. Now, the Chiefs obviously feel different about that, because they not only were willing to pay him that, but they restructured him, which made it more difficult for them to get rid of here, okay? He will probably be getting a lot of the starting snaps again. Say this for Wilson and Hitchens, okay? Wilson and Hitchens both, they play hard, they play aggressive, they tackle well. Those things they do well. The things they don't do well, they do not do well in coverage, in pass coverage. They do not get good pressure on the quarterback. And they do not do very well against the run. They do not do well in any of those departments. They struggle in all of them. And when you break down the video and you look at it, it's almost like they're the guys who are kind of cleaning up the mess. These are the guys who come in after something has happened and they clean up the mess. They're good at tackling. They are good at being aggressive. They're good at all of that. They have great work ethic and great attitude. I'm not questioning any of that. But in today's modern NFL, they just do not seem to have the ability to step up and be what's demanded of linebackers. Now, I'll say this. I think linebacker has become one of the more difficult spots to play in the NFL. I think by far it has moved to that. Years ago, and this was true for decades, linebackers were asked to watch the running game, stuff the running game, and then get after the quarterback. And it was very easy to kind of build off of those two thoughts. Running game, quarterback. Ball, quarterback. Running back, football. It was I won't say it's easy, it was a lot less mentally taxing. Now, over the past few seasons, linebackers have been asked to do a lot more. They have been asked to keep their head on a swivel. They are asked to stuff the running game. They are asked to get pressure on the quarterback. They are asked to pass off tight ends and running backs and crossing wide receivers and send them on to the next zone. They are asked to run on wheel routes with running backs. They are asked to run seam routes with tight ends. They are asked to do so much in today's NFL. I think the next great improvement, the next great place that defensive coordinators can really make their defense better is to simplify the tasks that are given to linebackers, because linebacker world has become the land of mismatches, and there are very few players who are capable of doing three-dimensional football, if you will. Now, Ray Lewis for the Ravens was an absolute master at it. You talk about a guy years ago who was physically gifted enough, had the heart, had the football IQ. He was a defensive chess master. And you will never see better football video than when you watch Ray Lewis go up against Tom Brady, or Ray Lewis go up against Peyton Manning and play chess, offensive and defensive. But there just aren't many Ray Lewises out there. And linebacker has become infinitely more complex to play than ever. And so it's just very difficult to ask a guy, even if athletically he's very gifted, even if he has good football IQ, it's very, very difficult to ask a guy to be good in pass coverage, zone and man, and stuff the run, and also get pressure on quarterbacks. It's just very difficult to do that, because NFL offenses today, offensive coordinators and quarterbacks have figured out that we can attack the middle, we can flood the middle with cuts and with bubble screens and with seam routes and with just you name it. It's almost like a bunch of surgeons operating on the middle, and the linebackers are the ones getting operated on. So the defensive coordinator who can figure out, I'm going to use this guy for pass coverage, this guy for pass coverage and for pressure on the quarterback, this is going to be my run stopper, and really simplify the game for linebackers and not give them such complex tasks. The guys who can do that, that is where you see the growth in defenses. And so we'll see if that happens. Now, going back here, the Chiefs at the moment, Wilson and Hitchens struggle a lot in those areas. And I don't know, we could start talking to the defensive coordinators about what they're asking the linebackers to do specifically for the Chiefs. But Wilson and Hitchens, good athletes, good production, good at tackling, but they struggle in all the areas that modern linebackers are being asked to do. They're not even good at any one area, which makes me wonder, are they being asked to do too much? Don't know that. You guys can answer that for me. Wilson and Hitchens, though, eating up $17 million out of your cap number just for two linebackers. Ben Niemann is a guy who actually looks good in pass coverage. And again, limited snaps. Maybe they're not asking him to do a whole lot when he gets in the game. But when he drops into pass coverage as a linebacker, he does it very well. Doesn't do good at getting the quarterback necessarily. He's not horrible. He doesn't necessarily strong against the run. He's kind of soft there as well as far as what we've seen so far. But in pass coverage, he's good at that. He's good at dropping back, zone or man, and holding down the fort there at linebacker. So I would love to see Niemann get more time this year in pass coverage for the Chiefs and pick up some more snaps. Could he be a full-time starter? I'm not yet convinced of that, but I would love to see him start and steal away some of the snaps here that Hitchens and Wilson got in 2019. Willie Gay Jr., here's a guy here from Mississippi State, second-round draft pick, $960,000. Just a rookie. We'll see what he can offer, but you got to be excited to hear that the Chiefs have started to address this position with higher draft picks and hopefully bring in a guy here with Gay who can lock down a starting spot. It would be wonderful. We don't know if we'll see it or not. It would be wonderful if Gay Jr. could step up and pick up a lot of snaps and make you look at maybe having a real shot at a good starting linebacker here for the Chiefs in the years ahead. So excited to have Gay Jr. there, but again, rookie season, we'll see what he can do. I do expect him to get a lot of snaps this season, maybe 600, maybe 800, we'll see. Dorian O'Daniel is a guy who's an excellent athlete. Not sure if he's ever going to make major contributions at linebacker. Right now, he's making good special teams contributions, so he's a valuable guy on the team, only $970,000. This is a guy you like having on the team, real athlete. We'll see if he ever really steps up at linebacker. I would love to see him do that. He might be just a little bit undersized for linebacker, but his ball skills are good. I have to even wonder, you never know. I would think that Dorian O'Daniel is fast enough and athletic enough to do what Daniel Sorensen is doing here at safety. So I don't know if the Chiefs have any interest in trying to move Dorian O'Daniel to safety, but he's one of those guys who you kind of wonder, Could he be better off at a different position? Does he really have a strong suit there at linebacker? We'll see about him in the years to come. I think I've covered everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. We'll try to cover the Chiefs offense. But I do want to end it with this. No reason